Well, it's that time of year again. There's only one page left on my The Far Side Tear-Off calendar, which means that it must be the new year. 2023 seems like it's flown by, but also like 2022 could have happened a decade ago. So why not take a walk down memory lane while we wait for the ball to drop and go over some of the happenings of old 23. Or at least some of the more lighthearted happenings, because I don't feel like talking about all the war and such. I'll discuss major events in pop culture and the like, summarizing them and giving my personal thought. And of course, I'm one person with, well, let's say unique tastes. That's what I'll do. So I won't talk about every single thing that's happened this year in pop culture, just the things that I care about, or that I personally experienced. It'll be fun. Spoiler warnings for most things that happened this year, so if you've been living under a rock since last December, this video will be perfect for you. Proceed with caution. Now, the elephant in the room that will no doubt go on to define 2023 as a year is the rise of generative AI, most notably ChatGPT. And sure enough, it seems like almost every other event I'm going to be talking about is tied back to ChatGPT in one way or another. Generative AI has been around for longer than you might think, but 2023 marks the point where it's hit its stride in terms of both public attention and quality. Some examples of generative AI that have gotten their 15 minutes of fame this year include AI art programs, speech and singing synthesis, and the big one, large language models and/or generative pre-trained transformers, which is what ChatGPT is. Even as a computer science student, I don't fully understand what goes on under the hood with these, but I think I get the gist. Still though, take this explanation with a grain of salt, I could be way off. But the very, very basic version of it is that LLMs, such as ChatGPT, scan over a massive database of articles, websites, journals, what have you, and then process a user-inputted prompt. Using probability and linear algebra and some other weird machine learning stuff that I can and will complete a bachelor's degree in computer science without fully understanding, it builds up what the most likely correct answer to that prompt would be. And there you have it, an answer that's probably not correct. There are a lot of problems with ChatGPT. Like how AI art programs like DALL-E can only make images that look half decent by exploiting our pattern-seeking human minds, ChatGPT can only make answers that look correct, not actually correct answers. I suppose that it does produce factually correct answers, but, even a blind squirrel. And that's exactly what ChatGPT is. It's blind. People have a tendency to anthropomorphize AI, sometimes literally. However, generative AI like ChatGPT, no matter how impressive, is still in its infancy, and nowhere near the general AI that you might expect from science fiction. AI right now is great at making results that look convincing, and to quote Randall XKCD, the results look pretty convincing. But there's really nothing going on up top between the ears with current AI. They aren't sentient or conscious, and that's a big hurdle that general AI needs to overcome. One way that I like to illustrate it is by comparing generative AI to a funnel. Granted, it's an incredibly complicated and impressive funnel, but at the end of the day, all that it really does is take what you give it and push that out in a different form. Even though I want to see sentient AI as much as the next guy, I feel like ChatGPT or even super impressive AI models like Google's DeepMind's Gato are a bit of a dead end for general AI. The only real way to move forward is to progress on making AI conscious, giving it memory and senses and the rest of what makes the human mind so special. As a Scientific American article about the subject says, featuring a quote from Harvard computer scientist Les Valiant, the central challenge going forward is to unify the formulation of learning and reasoning. You can't deal with a person carrying a stop sign if you don't really understand what a stop sign even is. So, how do we make sentient AI? Heck if I know. But I have a hunch, and the computer scientists in the crowd might get angry at me for this, but I have a hunch that the future of AI has a lot less to do with programming and computer science, and a lot more to do with biology and psychology. Trying to recreate human intelligence without fully understanding it is surprisingly analogous to the output of ChatGPT itself. You might be able to make something that looks close to human intelligence, but you won't get anywhere close to the real thing. Now, with that tirade finished, what about the practical effects of ChatGPT in everyday life? Its capabilities might be rudimentary from an AI perspective, but that doesn't mean that it isn't good at what it sets out to do. And it turns out there are a lot of things that ChatGPT can do for us bags of flesh and bone. Some of them are good and fun, and some of them are not that. Let's start with the good news. ChatGPT can be very wrong about a lot of things, and when that isn't in the form of blatant racism, that's funny. Here's one of my favorites. Yeah, I asked it to rewrite the opening to the B movie without using the letter E, and I guess that just broke it. This is nonsense. It can also be right about a lot of things, which can be helpful in some cases, and in others it's just novel. In general, the best uses of ChatGPT that I've seen are just for fun. For example, some YouTubers such as Failboat and RaiseFire took Super Mario Bros. Wonder, we'll get to that later, and used ChatGPT to spice up the talking flowers a bit, and I must say the results are amusing. Now, when it comes to more serious but still overall good uses of ChatGPT, it can be used in moderation in plenty of creative endeavors. For example, this entire script was written by me. Had you going there, didn't I? This is definitely more of a gray area in a lot of ways. Like, I know a lot of people who use ChatGPT in their work to a reasonable, safe capacity, but I also know plenty of people who hate everything that ChatGPT stands for and refuse to even consider using it at all. Now, I can respect both opinions as well as any stance between those two extremes, but I admit that I side a bit more with the former. I think that any reasonable person would agree that asking ChatGPT to write something for you, then copying and pasting that and saying that you wrote it is obvious plagiarism, but it can help in smaller ways that don't harm the integrity of the work overall. There are two main ways that I occasionally use ChatGPT in my work. The first is that sometimes I'll ask it to rephrase a sentence I've written. Like any writer, I have my own style, but that sometimes accumulates into sentences sounding stale, especially in longer works. For example, I've used the phrase "for example" 3 times in the last 5 minutes, and I've used the phrase a lot more than that. ChatGPT is like a supercharged thesaurus. It can make your stale sentences sound more unique, all while keeping your original authorial intent. ChatGPT can help you refresh your writing on a small scale, if not a large one. The other way that I like to use ChatGPT is as a sort of preliminary peer review. Once you're done writing something, give it to ChatGPT and ask for feedback. Sure, it can't compete with a real proofread by a real person, and most of its advice is going to be impossibly generic, but it can be a helpful first step before you submit something. As problematic as the anthropomorphization of ChatGPT can be, it can also remind you that you should be making use of writing tips that you already know. Having the illusion of a real person tell that to your face can be just as effective as having a not illusion of a real person tell you. Now, the common factor with both of those examples is that neither of them involves ChatGPT writing your work for you. Crucially, I only ever use ChatGPT after writing my own work. Because if you just ask ChatGPT to write something, the only real input that you can put into it is deciding whether to follow through with plagiarism or not. Because, well, that's what it is, plagiarism. We return to the funnel. It may have mixed people's words around quite a lot before giving them to you, but ChatGPT doesn't know anything. It has no mind. All of the words that ChatGPT gives to you are other people's words at the end of the day. This is where we get to the dark side of ChatGPT and why you should never, ever just ask ChatGPT to write something for you and pretend that you wrote it. Another big event from this year, or I guess a medium one, was HBomberGuys' video about plagiarism on YouTube. In it, he absolutely destroys people who have made a living off of reading other people's work, pretending it's theirs, and sicking their fanbase on anyone who gets wise as to what they're doing. Now, I won't rehash his entire video on plagiarism here for, well, incredibly obvious reasons. Still, it ended off with the message that ChatGPT is only going to make things easier for people making money off of the backs of other people's work. And some people aren't even trying to hide it. People have approached full-time honest artists to suggest that ChatGPT do all their work while they lie back and do nothing, I guess. Yeah, I haven't seen this one before. On another front for AI, corporations do be corporationing. DreamWorks co-founder Jeffrey Katzenberg, always the ray of sunshine we need, said that thanks to generative AI, animated movies in the future will take just 10% of the artists we needed to make them now. So I guess those other 450 people per capita had better get used to flipping burgers. Not only that, but one of the biggest controversies in entertainment this year, that's saying something, is the rumor that Disney themselves used ChatGPT to write their new movie Wish. Now, keep in mind that these are just rumors. Disney might not have used AI, they might have just used unqualified humans. Now, I haven't seen Wish myself, which seems to be the consensus, considering that it cost an entire Cars 2 to make and it didn't even manage to break even. But anyways, now that we've been talking about AI for a while, maybe it's time to switch gears and get to the pop culture already. 2023 marked the centennial anniversary of Disney. Oh wow, Disney, happy birthday! I got you your just desserts. Disney has somehow managed to walk away from the year with overall growth, but 2023 was also riddled with flops that have cost them lots of money and more respect. After holding the crown of the premier animation industry for, well, 100 years in the making, many fans, including myself, now just see them as a panicking giant, too big to fail, but too bloated to make much worthwhile. In addition to Wish from before, Disney spent nearly $1 billion this year making Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, Ant-Man Quantumania, The Little Mermaid 2023, and Secret Invasion. Out of those, I've seen Dial of Destiny, Quantumania, and the first few episodes of Secret Invasion. I thought that Dial of Destiny was a passable, if somehow simultaneously bland and convoluted action movie, and honestly I think that Quantumania is better than a lot of people give it credit for. Secret Invasion blatantly used AI to make its intro. Like, Disney wasn't even trying to hide it this time. Like, they were smug about it. I know that we've passed the dedicated AI portion of the video, but again, AI has infected everything that's happened this year. All of these projects were disasters in their own right, even if I did like Quantumania. And frankly, good. In my opinion, Disney has been sitting on their laurels for far too long, just about since Disney Plus first released. Every masterpiece they've made since then, which this year there's like one, and I haven't seen it, so, has been accompanied by bad shows and bad movies. Most of the time when a genuinely fantastic Disney production comes out as of late, it feels like it was good in spite of Disney, and not because of it. Disney has become the face of capitalism in a lot of ways, and, well, the one saving grace of capitalism is competition. Disney may have flailed this year, but 2023 has been an absolute dream for animation fans otherwise. Let's start with some of the big ones. When Sony's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse released back in 2018, it's fair to say that it started a revolution. 3D animation felt fresh and new again. It just looks beautiful. This year, other studios have caught up to what Sony started, and the 2.5 hand-painted look is becoming a lot more common. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the Spider-Verse style ended up being the overall vibe of the 20s. You know, like the 90s neon or the Pinterest board Apple Store vibe of the 10s. 2023 brought with it DreamWorks' Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Netflix's Nimona, Paramount's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem, and even Illumination's Migration, all taking advantage of some of the innovations that Spider-Verse brought to the table. And I guess we can include Disney's Wish, but that feels more like a style designed to make you think that Disney is finally innovating rather than a truly innovative style. And of course, Spider-Verse itself got a phenomenal sequel that once again redefines both superhero multiverse stories and animated movies overall. I'll talk about Spider-Verse and Puss in Boots, since those are the ones that I watched, but I've heard great things about all of the ones that I listed. Except for Wish. Across the Spider-Verse was a work of art. I know that I'm not going to say much that hasn't already been said here, so instead I'll say things that have already been said. My Letterboxd review. If Into the Spider-Verse was a telegram in an age of messages delivered by horseback, then Across the Spider-Verse is like telepathy. My only thought through the film was I wasn't aware that this was something that humans were capable of creating. And overall, it single-handedly rejuvenated my hope for animated movies in the future. And every word of that still rings true. It almost feels unfair to compare other movies coming out this year to Spider-Verse because it's Spider-Verse. What more is there to say? It's hilarious, it's heartfelt, looks like an art museum come to life. It's Spider-Verse. This movie has been dissected and praised by everyone with eyes at this point. It's not perfect, of course, but it is good on a historical level. Alongside the first movie, Across the Spider-Verse has inspired so many people, including myself, to create wonderful things. No doubt, things that will eventually surpass both of them. It's the curse of being as influential as Spider-Verse at the end of the day. What Spider-Verse did first, more and more people will start doing and innovating on. Eventually, Spider-Verse will look small in comparison. It's the same way that people will watch Citizen Kane or look at the Mona Lisa or listen to the Beatles and they don't get the hype, because what these works of art started continued for generations to come, past the wildest dreams of the people behind them. Still, I hope that Spider-Verse gets remembered as the masterpiece that it is. Well, I sure wouldn't want to follow that act, but something has to, so how about the second best animated movie from this year? I'll give you a hint. It's not Trolls Band Together. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. It's gained similar universal acclaim to Spider-Verse at this point, but I'd like to look at the movie from a different angle. Because, well, we all know that The Last Wish is great now. How exactly did this happen? Think about what led up to this movie. So, you start with the Shrek series, which is pretty cool. The second movie introduced a cat that acts and is voiced by Zorro, which then got an alright spin-off movie that I watched at my aunt's house when I was 8. Then, 11 years later, that movie got a sequel. The sequel proceeded to provide some of the most intense, realistic depictions of the fear of death ever shown in an animated form factor, redefining what it means to be a quote-unquote kids movie, and no doubt causing a major shift in cinema as a whole. Like, what? This movie, in the same series as Shrek Proves Ogres Can Rap, has the main character running from their own mortality with such stunning and intimidating imagery that it makes you feel like death is after you. When I saw a trailer for this movie for the first time, it happened to be April 1st, and I genuinely thought that it was a joke. How is DreamWorks, even as renowned as they are for their magical storytelling, going to release a movie in the Spider-Verse style as a sequel to the movie where a cat threatens to murder and eat Humpty Dumpty? It sounds like nonsense. But they delivered it. I mean, I gotta say, I had no faith in this movie before I saw it. Even with the positive praise that I had seen online, I just assumed that it was ironic. Frankly, I'm still in disbelief. But by now, I've seen this movie several times, and each viewing has been better than the last. It's great. By the way, can we talk about how good the soundtracks for both of these movies were? I love movie soundtracks, especially animated ones, and both of these delivered big time. Daniel Pemberton making good music is a fact of life, and his work on Spider-Verse has become downright iconic at this point. I mean, there's a reason why the Terror of the Prowlers theme has become a meme. It's the sincerest form of flattery, trust me. Pemberton truly gives it his all here. The visuals of Spider-Verse are fantastic, I mean, almost by definition at this point, but the music is really what elevates it up to an experience of a film. And it's no different with The Last Wish. The music is by Heitor Pereira, and while he clearly doesn't have as illustrious as a career as Daniel Pemberton, he still knocked it out of the park. Jack Horner's theme, The Fight with Death, and of course, Fearless Hero, are all wonderful tracks that I listen to regularly. This year's been pretty good for music, hasn't it? Let's switch off the movie discussion for a moment, don't worry, we'll get back to it, but let's discuss what I've been listening to this year. As a terminal Beatles fan, the biggest event that happened this year was, of course, the release of Now and Then, the last ever Beatles song, which was mostly just talked about because people misunderstood how AI was used in the process. Again, AI just has to get involved with everything this year. To be clear, all that they were doing with AI was getting rid of noise and ensuring that you could actually hear John Lennon singing. Now and Then is a good song, but I don't think it's a controversial opinion to say that it felt a little anticlimactic. I'm very glad that it got made, and I would rather it exist than not, but it doesn't really feel like the last Beatles song. I mean, it barely feels like a Beatles song at all. It's too melancholy, and it just feels like it's a John song. Maybe that's just because Now and Then is new, and we haven't gotten used to it yet. After all, contemporary critics, or even more modern ones, weren't very thrilled about Free as a Bird when it released back in the 90s. But to someone like me, hearing it for the first time just a year or two ago, it sounds exactly like a modern Beatles song. If anything, it sounds far more like the last Beatles song than Now and Then does. I just wonder if they released these songs in the wrong order. Would Now and Then feel more justified if it came out in 95, and would Free as a Bird feel more fitting as a finale if it came out this November? Maybe. Now and Then is, if anything, a heart-wrenching reunion for four friends, two of whom have passed on by now. I would be lying if I said that I don't feel anything listening to Paul and Ringo's aged voices ringing out next to the tragically young vocals of John. The song was almost certainly originally written for Yoko Ono, but come on. The lines, "Now and then I miss you, oh now and then I want you to be there for me," echo perfectly the story of the Beatles and of the song's creation. This is a song 28 years in the making from when Paul, Ringo, and George decided that it was beyond saving. Always return to me indeed. It's just sweet. I will say that if there's anything that this song is lacking, it's George Harrison. He plays guitar on it, but you can't really tell that it's him. It doesn't really feel right to call this a Beatles song without George, especially now that he's no longer in this material world. I mean, they put a lot of effort into bringing John back, but because of this song is basically just John, Paul, and Ringo. That said, I am glad that Ringo got to sing on it. Congratulations! Mr. I Only Sang lead vocals on 11 Beatles songs Starkey has been promoted to Sir Nevermind That Makes It 12 star. Speaking of Ringo, he was fairly active this year. He released a new EP, Rewind Forward, in October. Ringo's been silent in terms of albums since 2019, which is understandable, but he's still been releasing new tunes on EPs consistently since then. Out of the tracks on Rewind Forward, I'd say that the star is probably Shadows on the Wall. It's a wonderful, very Ringo pop rock jam, and it reminds me a lot of what the various Beatles were doing in the late 90s and aughts. The next track, Feeling the Sunlight, isn't bad by any means, but it doesn't stand out to me much. It's your standard Ringo Starr peace and love jaunt. The title track is surprisingly a weak point for me, and I'm not sure if that's actually how Ringo thinks you pronounce forward. And Miss Jean is a classic rocker that you really can't go wrong with. Overall, Rewind Forward is just a treat. Frankly, it's more exciting to me to know that Ringo's still going strong with his own stuff than it is to listen to Now and Then. Let's be honest with ourselves, the Beatles haven't been together since 1970, but we'll always have Ringo. Oh, and he also did a collab with Pentatonix and Diane Warren on a birthday song released on September 8, which is not Diane Warren's birthday, but I guess that's what they were aiming for. It's also kind of a bop, and I don't know how to feel about that. Also, Wikipedia has apparently yet to notice this song, considering that it isn't in the article for Ringo, Pentatonix, or Diane Warren's discographies. I may be hallucinating this song, I don't know. Hi there, brief tangent time. While I'm on the Ringo section of the video, I'd like to mention that Oxford chose the word Riz to be the word of the year. Can't say I'm surprised it has defined the trendy vernacular for this year, but anywhere that you will look will tell you that Riz, short for charisma, is a term coined by the Twitch streamer Kai Cenat in 2021. But this is absolutely false. You see, the person who coined the term Riz is none other than Ringo Starr himself, in his 1981 song Drumming Is My Madness. Listen to this clip.
Watch me now, Riz off!
And sure enough, looking at the lyrics, that's what he says. R-I-Z-Z. Coincidence? Yeah, no, probably. But I mean, look at his face. That's Riz. This bit is stupid. Anyways, in comparison, Paul McCartney hasn't done nearly as much this year, or at least we haven't seen what he's been working on. The biggest event with him, apart from Now and Then, was his Got Back tour, which I hear was pretty cool. I wasn't there, I was busy seeing Ringo on tour, but I watched Elliot Roberts' review of it, and I gotta say it sounded great. Apparently, Paul has said in the tour book that he's interested in doing a tour with nothing but deep cuts, and as someone who has every Paul McCartney album downloaded, count me in. And yes, seeing Ringo in concert was a pretty mind-blowing experience. I've said it once and I'll say it again. Ringo Starr may have been born in 1940, but he's still younger than any of us. It may not seem like it, but I do listen to more than soundtracks and the Beatles. In fact, the Beatles aren't even my favorite band, as if that means anything when they're the Beatles. The Go Team, an indie group from the UK, released a new album back in February, part 2 of 2021's Get Up sequences. It definitely picks up where part 1 left off, with songs like Gemini or But We Keep On Trying feeling like they could have come from either. I think the Apple Music description for this album describes Get Up 2 perfectly in a single word. Kaleidoscopic. The animated album art complete with VHS effects in every color ever made, the secret track after Baby that harkens back to Get It Together from their debut album, which I have on vinyl, and even the cameo appearances by the Star Feminine Band, a group from Benin, West Africa, and Nitty Scott, a singular person from Orlando, all add toward Get Up 2 sending the message that, yep, the Go Team still got it. This is a really important album to me, just like all of their work. I'm more than excited to see what the future holds for them. Now then, we've gone from one of the biggest bands of all time to Ringo to an obscure indie group. What's next? How about an album from someone who only started releasing their own music this year? Rebecca Sugar started her music career, or at least her music career separate from TV shows, this year with the release of her first EP, Spiral Bound, on November 3rd. And I've gotta say, Spiral Bound is simply delightful. Sugar's voice has always been one of the softest and most comforting I've ever heard, and that continues to the 6 comfy, cozy, lo-fi acoustic songs on Spiral Bound. All of the songs have comfy, cozy exteriors, while some of them admit that sometimes everything gets to be too much. The only real weak spot in the album for me is the track I Didn't Mean To, which is just a tad repetitive and slow for me. Other than that, as the children say, the vibes are immaculate with this one. I can't wait for the next time Rebecca Sugar makes music just for her own sake rather than a show. And speaking of shows, I honestly didn't watch many of the shows that came out this year. I haven't even gotten around to watching Adventure Time Fiona and Cake, even though I really want to. I've just been experiencing it vicariously through YouTube clips. I of course watched the Owl House finale, and it's a shame that that show got cut so short. It clearly deserved to go at least as long as Amphibia did. I watched the first bit of season 2 of The Ghost and Molly McGee, but frankly I think I'm content with that show only having one season. It was good while it lasted, but at this point I've about had my fill. Other than that, I haven't really seen some of the bigger animated events in TV this year, like the Scott Pilgrim anime, Haley's on It, or the Hilda finale, so what did I watch? Sorry. Star Trek shows. Season 3 of Picard, Season 2 of Strange New Worlds, and Season 4 of Lower Decks all came out this year, and my opinions are mixed. Frankly, I didn't care too much for Picard Season 3. I feel like his story wrapped up fairly nicely in Season 2, and they didn't do too much else that really hooked me in this season. I don't know, maybe it's because they got rid of the epic Season 2 title sequence in favor of a 2-second title screen. This isn't exciting. Strange New Worlds was definitely the most eventful of the 3, featuring a crossover episode with Lower Decks that was honestly really cool, and a musical episode that was alright. Starting with the Lower Decks crossover, it is surreal yet awesome to see live-action versions of characters that were previously only animated. I love how they explain in-universe why Lower Decks is animated, and the episode itself is great. It's the kind of crossover that progresses both stories instead of just being a non-canon, wouldn't it be wacky if this happened? I'll get to it. Anyways, I liked it. Now, for the musical episode, I didn't care for the sarcastic, well that happened humor that they threw in at basically every point. Just about every song ended exactly the same, and the only song that I found interesting was the first one. That said, the first one is excellent. Other highlights from the season include every time Spock is on screen, especially when he turns into a human, the episode where everyone keeps losing their memories, and that weird A Quiet Place-esque finale. And finally, Lower Decks. That Badgie episode was pretty great, I gotta say. I appreciate that even if it might look like nothing more than Family Guy in space at a glance, Lower Decks is actually really genuine. It dodges a lot of annoying tropes and overall has just as much merit as any live-action Star Trek show, which is great. I haven't been into Star Trek, or, well, alive for that matter, for long enough to know anything about the animated series, but in the current entertainment industry climate, it's nice that Lower Decks isn't a throwaway just because it's animated, or because of its more episodic nature. I mean, to be fair, I think Lower Decks Season 4 had more of an overarching plot than Strange New Worlds Season 2. And, by the way, take everything I'm saying here with a grain of salt, because even though I watched every Star Trek series that came out this year, I'm by no means a Trekkie. These are basically my only experience with the franchise, so I'm reviewing them in a vacuum. Alright, that's enough Star Trek. Star Wars. I didn't watch The Bad Batch Season 2, probably because I've never seen The Clone Wars, please don't waterboard me for that, nor did I watch Vision Season 2. I fell off of Ahsoka after realizing that I have both mortality and better things to do with it, but I did finish The Mandalorian Season 3. So all in all, I'm a Trekkie now. First, let's talk Ahsoka and why I gave up on it. Well, first of all, I never watched The Clone Wars or Rebels, both of which Ahsoka is a follow-up to, but also, I was just getting tired of Star Wars shows in general. Star Wars as a franchise really seems to be stagnating to me at the moment. I'm a slightly more casual fan than most, so for me, Star Wars is defined by the movies. For something to feel worthwhile to me, it has to somehow tie back into the main saga. And while the shows aren't necessarily failing in that regard, when they do tie back to the movies, they tie back to the classics, to the prequels and the original trilogy. Modern Star Wars isn't my favorite, but a franchise can't succeed if it doesn't move forward. Just look at what Avatar: The Last Airbender is doing. It pushes forward to new ideas, even if those ideas aren't necessarily in the series' comfort zone. Adventure Time Fiona and Cake could have gone back to the familiar, but by taking risks in setting and style, it flourished. Ahsoka, and by extension the rest of the Star Wars shows coming out, feel like they're stuck in the past in a lot of ways. Shows like Andor get a pass because they're great regardless, but even that felt locked behind the movies and their, at least to me, increased importance compared to the shows. We already know what the end outcome of these stories are because they all build up to movies that have been out for decades. I really just want a Star Wars show to expand beyond the Skywalker saga. I know that there's a movie coming up in 3 years that's going to take place after Rise of Skywalker, but I still just feel like the Star Wars timeline is getting stale. Now, I did finish Mandalorian Season 3, and it's alright. I like Din Djarin settling down at the end and finishing up his arc of being Grogu's father. I like stories about lone wolves that adopt small children. It's cute. Even if I've never gotten people that insist that Grogu himself is cute, which he really isn't that much, but I don't mind him as a character. Nor do I mind Din as a character. Really, Mando Season 3 was good, if very forgettable. I think it had something to do with Ahsoka, with the space whales and all, but I wouldn't know because I didn't watch most of Ahsoka. While I wasn't personally impressed by Disney Plus's Star Wars output this year, I wasn't nearly as disappointed with their Marvel offerings, as long as we ignore Secret Invasion. I was quite enamored with the first season of Loki, and the second has a lot to live up to for me. Loki Season 2 wasn't perfect, nor was it nearly as good as the first, but it did keep, and sometimes it even improved, on the vibes of the original. Which is a big deal for a show like Loki. I mean, they went to the Automat. They went to a circa 1980s McDonald's. They played a fifth of Beethoven. This show has excellent vibes. I just wish those vibes accompanied a better show. Now, don't get me wrong, Loki Season 2 isn't terrible, but it did kind of feel like every single episode ended by resetting all of the progress the protagonists had made back to nothing, which was very frustrating. I mean, did we really need an entire episode dedicated to Loki figuring out that all he had to do was believe in the power of friendship, which gives him the power to undo the cliffhanger ending of the last episode? That's just tedious. That said, some perks of growing completely indifferent to the MCU include not worrying about the lore implications that all of this brings up. I think that the MCU has introduced 5 different multiverse systems since Endgame, and not one of them works with the other. But what that means for Loki specifically is that you don't need to care about the outcome of the show. You can just sit back and enjoy the character moments. Tom Hiddleston, Owen Wilson, Ke Huy Quan, every character in the show is just a blast to watch. Ignore that part. But other than that, they're great. I love how psychopathic they made the clock for no real reason, and the ending imagery of Loki creating the Yggdrasil out of the hilariously contradictory multiverse is great. Loki is a flawed show, but at this point in the MCU, you start to realize that those flaws don't matter nearly as much. Just like in Season 1 of Loki, once it's already up in flames, not much matters. So you don't need to worry about it. Just sit back and enjoy it in a vacuum. The other Marvel show from this year was What If Season 2, which wrapped up yesterday. Cutting it a bit close, don't you think? I'm actually writing this script ahead of time, which means that I've only seen up to the Gamora and Tony episode, but what I've seen so far is not bad by any means. I wouldn't call it as good as the first season, no surprise there, but this season has its moments too. I think the highlight thus far has been episode 2. I loved seeing T'Chaka as Black Panther, as well as the overall vibe of the Avengers, but older. I'm not so sure that I buy the kid as young Chris Pratt, but other than that, it was great. The Happy Hogan Die Hard episode was pretty great too. I've always liked episodes of shows where a side character gets stuck with a big threat, and when they try to call them mains, they're all busy doing life things. And oh yeah, the episode with Iron Man and Gamora on Sakaar was really cool. It's interesting that Thor Ragnarok introduced both a one-hit obliterator rod and a massive universe-spanning villain, but until this episode I never thought about just melting Thanos and being done with it. I'm sure the other episodes that I haven't seen are cool too. The one catching my eye from the Wikipedia episode list is What If Hela Found the Ten Rings, which is an awesome concept. I love it when a sequel to a big crossover event ties in everything that came out in between it and the first. By the time you hear this, I'll probably have watched it. I hope that it doesn't turn out to be bad. Because the first episode of this season was not great. Not terrible, but overall uninspiring. But hey, at least it had Howard the Duck and Groot, Korg, and Meek teamed up under the name Rock, Paper, Scissors. So that wraps it up for Marvel this year. I haven't seen Guardians 3 or the Marvels. I'll get around to one of them, you know, the one. But at this point, it's been a while since I've talked about the movies from this year, so let's get back to that. Let's start back up on a high note. The big movie event this year, partially ironically and partially because the writer's strike didn't leave us with much else, was, of course, Barbenheimer. June 21st rolled around, and so did two completely opposite movies. One, a mature think piece about events that would rock the world to its core, and the other, Oppenheimer. I only saw the Barben part of the whole debacle, and I think that's probably the best way to go. Similar to Puss in Boots 2, when I heard so much positive criticism about Barbie, I imagined it was ironic. I mean, come on, it's Barbie movie. But no, this movie is genuinely fantastic. At this point, it might be a little overplayed, but that's hardly the movie's fault. This movie single-handedly saved feminism. I don't really want to rehash its themes because I'm not confident enough in my writing skills to encapsulate how great it is. There's a following of people campaigning for this movie to be Film of the Year, and honestly, count me among the deranged. Beyond the way that this movie breaks down the concept of gender roles, not just by showing them being subverted, but by ripping them out by the roots and showing how things could be better on all sides, it's also an incredibly human story that strangely has a lot of elements from things like The Good Place or Soul. It's also really funny, and its fourth wall is an atom meter thick. You've gotta watch it. Or not, it's a free country, but you should. You know, the nice thing about this movie is that not only is it God tier, but everyone knows how good it is. After all, it's in the top 15 highest grossing movies ever, and obviously it's the highest grossing movie that came out this year. I mean, I'm sure nothing else from this year got even close to that. Well, there's an entire Age of Ultron between them. 2023 also brought with it the release of the Super Mario Bros. Movie. No, not that one. The lead up to this movie was legendary, back when people were flabbergasted by the casting of Chris Pratt as Mario, when he photobombed a Nintendo Direct to misremember the events of Mario Bros, when he didn't do the accent, when he did the accent, when he didn't do the accent. Chris Pratt's adventure from this movie's reveal to its release is more substantial than anything that happened in the movie. Some people liked him, some people thought that it should have been Charles Martinet, and the smart people cared more about Jack Black as Bowser. He really was made for this role, wasn't he? But anyways, how good is the movie itself? Well, it did single-handedly save feminism, rejuvenate my hopes for animated movies in the future, and push the Star Wars timeline further than it's ever been, so it's pretty good. Could have used more George Harrison, though. Honestly, the entirety of my criticism for this film is that sure was the Super Mario Bros. Movie. It's what you expect. There's Mario, he goes on an adventure, he beats Bowser, there are a lot of Nintendo references, which is fun, but it's hardly the great American film. It's one that I'll rewatch every so often, but it didn't even make the spot of my second favorite Illumination movie. Third, hashtag Sing 2 sweep. I'm glad that it did well, but it wasn't anything to write home about. If it wasn't Mario, it would be worthless. But it is Mario, so it's worthful. See, this is one of those movies that critics despise because it prioritizes reference to the game and little background materials over being an exceptional movie on its own, while fans of the source material love it to death because of exactly that. I'm sure nothing else from this year got even close to being that. I should stop ending paragraphs like that or I'm never going to finish the script. Five Nights at Freddy's movie. It was similarly alright to the Mario movie. I think that even on the level of details and references, it's not nearly as good. Outside just the fact that Five Nights at Freddy's is already a series that's more lore-based gives it a head start. Any little detail in the FNAF movie carries a lot more weight than in the Mario movie. As such, I think that they balance out. FNAF has a plot, but it's more so in the background and lore than in the games themselves, at least in the earlier games like the movie is based on. Overall, I liked both this and the Mario movie, and I'm glad more movies like them are being made. In terms of the movie themselves, in terms of the movie itself, why was Cupcake so involved? I don't even think Cupcake is its own character until the fourth game. Why was it the one that incited the creation of the most iconic villain in the series? William Afton got shot and tased in that suit, but no, the Cupcake is what set off the spring logs. I would comment on the plot, but the plot's pretty much Ant-Man 1, but slightly worse, now featuring a dead brother, an evil aunt, and a haunted Chuck E. Cheese. Why isn't William Afton purple? Anyway, some other things happened in the world of FNAF this year. Security Breach got its Ruin DLC, which finally probably got rid of William Afton as the main villain, and introduced Cassie as a new main character. FNAF is finally getting interesting again. Help Wanted also got a sequel, and frankly, I think that FNAF should always be VR. It's just so much more interesting than looking at a screen and pressing buttons, or even a more open 3D game like Security Breach. Plus, secrets just feel better when it feels like you're really standing in the room with them. Health 1 and 2 also finally probably got rid of Liam Afton as the main villain. Please, I don't want to see that rabbit ever again. We're finally getting close to the end, so let's move firmly into the last medium that we'll be covering. I mean, I guess I could go over books from this year, but I didn't read any of them. I only ever really read books that have been out for a while anyways. This year I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and several issues of the Kirby manga, and that's about it. Anyways, video games this year. Just like 2017, this year is headlined by a groundbreaking Zelda and a groundbreaking Mario. Starting with Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom is amazing, surprising nobody. It's very easy to compare Tears of the Kingdom to Across the Spider-Verse from this year. The original was a revolution that redefined its medium, and the sequel made it look small. Tears of the Kingdom is by all means a more capable and full game, but it does sacrifice some of the vibes of Breath of the Wild to do so. Building vehicles with Ultra Hand and fusing random weapons and items together is really fun, but that fun comes at the price of the somber, down-to-earth nature of Breath of the Wild. Overall, Tears of the Kingdom is a lot sillier and more light-hearted than Breath of the Wild, which can sting sometimes. Now, that's not to say that Tears of the Kingdom doesn't have its own brand of vibes. So much happens in this game that feels like you're experiencing history. Tears of the Kingdom takes the post-apocalyptic setting of the first game and turns it into a world that's being rebuilt, piece by piece. Little changes between games, like how Terrytown has become an institution in Hyrule after being built from the ground up in the first game, or how Kakariko's village's economy has shifted due to the influx of tourism, or the fact that newspapers are being distributed through the kingdom, make everything feel very real and very important. I've always been intrigued by transitionary periods in history, things like the first eras of civilization, or the first widespread uses of electricity. And this is exactly what that feels like. Its vibes remind me a lot of Avatar: The Last Airbender. That started out as a simple story taking place in a mostly pre-industrial era, and slowly grew, naturally and gradually introducing new technology and shifting the world in a way that really lets you feel history moving. It's the same with Tears of the Kingdom. Like, you can invent cheese and use it to make new dishes that have never been seen before, like pizza. That scratches such a specific itch for me that I really haven't seen anyone else talk about. Unfortunately, I'm probably never going to finish Tears of the Kingdom, just like how I'm probably never going to finish Breath of the Wild. With these games, I always avoid going to the final boss because I want to finish everything first, but the problem with that mindset is that these games are absolutely never-ending. I'm very happy with Tears of the Kingdom. Maybe it's not as much of a revolution as its predecessor was when it came out, but it's still a game that's very dear to me. I can't wait to see where the Zelda world will go next. I don't think anyone was surprised by the excellence of Tears of the Kingdom. I mean, it's the sequel to one of the most important games of all time, plus it won Most Anticipated Game at the Game Awards. Now, a bigger surprise was the release of Super Mario Bros. Wonder, the newest and freshest 2D Mario game, finally freeing the series from the shackles of the new Super Mario Bros. Format and delivering something absolutely wonderful. Mario Wonder was announced in the Nintendo Direct this September, alongside every other Mario game. One Direct announced Mario Wonder, Mario RPG Remake, Princess Peach Showtime, WarioWare Move It, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, and Paper Mario Thousand Year Door Remake. Frankly, it's a wonder that they had room for Detective Pikachu Returns. I've seen some people saying that Nintendo's trying to milk the influx of Mario popularity that came from the runaway success of the Mario movie, and I kinda get that, but most of these games probably started development before the Mario movie even came out. I doubt that Mario Wonder wouldn't have gotten made if only 7 people saw the Mario movie. But anyways, Mario Wonder is delightful. It feels far more alive than the new Soup games, but with all of the different moves that you can do, items you can find, badges you can choose, this feels like it takes a lot of inspiration from user-created Mario Maker levels. New Soup levels all feel like variations of each other that have different obstacles, and that's about it. With Mario Wonder, you really get the feeling that the developers were completely free to do whatever they wanted, and that makes the game feel, once again, really alive. It also takes a lot of cues from indie platforms. Take the super tight platforming of the final level, for example. It brought me right back to the feeling of Celeste, and it was actually the first time that the Mario Lives mechanic has actively contributed to the gameplay. Since you can easily die hundreds of times in this level, it makes everything feel all the more tense, like a timer ticking down. Mario Wonder is some of the purest fun that I've ever had with a video game. Now, with all that said, it isn't perfect. It's one giant leap for Mario games, don't get me wrong, but it does have its flaws. The biggest problem that I've noticed with Mario Wonder is with the collectibles. Throughout the game, you're collecting Wonder Seeds, which unlock levels moving forwards. These are the main collectibles of the game, but the problem is that they don't feel very substantial to collect. There are only 3 ways to get Wonder Seeds: by completing a level, by completing a Wonder Flower event, or buying them in the shop. So if you play all of the game normally and experience everything, you are going to get the Wonder Seeds. There's no question in it, which makes them less satisfying because you know exactly how to get all of them. Compare that with the moons from Mario Odyssey. There are hundreds of moons, but they're all fun because you don't know where most of them are. There are hundreds of moons, but they're all fun because you don't know where most of them are. You get moons naturally by playing the game through, but you'll find most of them by exploring the world, messing around, doing things that in of themselves don't have anything to do with game completion. I think that Mario Wonder could have benefited greatly from having another collectible that could be hidden wherever, like moons or stars. The obvious answer to this is the 10 coins, which take the place of star coins from the new Soup games, but those are no fun. I mean, they're just 10 coins. You could get the same thing by collecting 10 coins. I mean, if they didn't count towards the 100% mark, no one would even bother collecting all of them. There also aren't many unique bosses in Mario Wonder. It's just Bowser and Bowser Jr., and mostly Bowser Jr. For a game that subverts and breaks free from so much of what's gotten stale in the new Soup games, Mario Wonder definitely didn't answer the complaint of those games having repetitive bosses. I mean, at the very least, they could have given us the different Koopalings. There isn't even a boss fight in the end of half of the worlds. But in the grand scheme of things, those complaints are minor. Mario Wonder is a grand slam for the Mario series and for Nintendo in general. I hope that we get more games like it, but I also hope that it doesn't get as bloated and stale as New Soup has got. Really, I hope that future Mario games try to learn from it without copying it. I mean, is that too much to ask? This really has been a watershed year for Nintendo, and I certainly haven't played all that they've come out with. I played the demo for Pikmin 4, I really enjoyed it. I planned to buy it when it came out, and then I proceeded to not follow through. Pikmin is a really fun series that I consider myself a casual fan of, but I was much more interested in the games that I've already discussed, and I'm not exactly made of money or time. There was also a new WarioWare game, which feels super fast after the last one. It's a more traditional WarioWare this time, which is to say a less traditional one. It's a spiritual successor to Smooth Moves on the Wii, utilizing similar motion controls. It's another one that I definitely want to play eventually, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. I'm just very excited about the Rhythm Heaven references. It's extremely clear that this studio still cares a lot about Rhythm Heaven, and my hunger for a new game grows every day. Here's hoping for next year. I felt like this year was heavier on games than it was. Maybe I just didn't play many of the big names besides Nintendo's output. I didn't play Pizza Tower, Spider-Man 2, or the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet DLC, but it was a good year for games regardless. I don't have a segue for this, but I realized that I forgot to talk about indie animation, so let's do that. 2023 was an incredible year for indie animation. The two frontrunners were, of course, Lackadaisy, a gorgeous hand-drawn adaptation of a comic about bootlegger cats running a speakeasy, and The Amazing Digital Circus, a CGI psychological dark comedy about someone being trapped in a late 90s computer game and losing their mind. With Lackadaisy crowdfunding over $1 million, including 5 of mine, and Digital Circus becoming the most watched animation pilot on YouTube with over 200 million views, both are going to release full seasons and no doubt inspire indie animation to new heights in the future. I'm ecstatic. AAA animation is on shaky ground right now, but corporations can never take away our ability to create art. I'd especially like to highlight the journey of Kevin Temer, the lead animator for Digital Circus. He started out working at big-name Blue Sky Studios and was left to his own devices after it shut down. He proceeded to make 3D animated music videos and memes for his YouTube channel, all of painfully high quality. And now, his work has been viewed and appreciated by a group of people over half the population of the United States. That's amazing. I can't wait for more from these two projects. And that is about it for 2023. I'm sure I could come up with more things that happened this year, but it's 5:30 p.m. on December 31st as I write this, and I don't want to be too late with this coming out. But before I end, I'd like to briefly look ahead to the new year. A lot of the games that I mentioned will come out next year, which will be interesting. The only one that I'm really interested in is the Thousand Year Door remake, though. The others that have yet to be released seem more minor to me. Kung Fu Panda 4 is the first movie that comes to mind for next year, and I'm fairly excited about it. If 2024's animated output is anything like 2023's, I'm going to be very happy with it. Plus, a big event that's happening January 1st, the copyright for the original Steamboat Willie goes into the public domain. Happy birthday, Disney. I can't wait to see what the vibe of 2024 will be. 2023 was a year defined by the rise of AI, but also the increased awareness of laziness in art. We generally rejected what was safe and repetitive, and embraced what was risky and fresh. Will 2024 continue in that direction? Will we grow even more distrustful of large corporations? What indie projects will get their wings in 2024 and become modern classics? What anticipations will turn out not to pay off in the end, leaving us burned and disappointed? Well, I only know one thing for sure. Heaven Studio is the... Okay, I was going to say that Heaven Studio is coming out this January, but then I looked for the trailer and it looks like it was delisted or taken down. Did it get delayed? No, it's probably still coming out this year, hopefully. It's not really a new Rhythm Heaven, but I'll take what I can get. Until then, stay safe, expect the unexpected, and have a good 2024.